Welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, J.R. Stewart, the J.R. Stewart.
And this is your co-host, Tommy Duncan. Jimmy, it's Wednesday night, August 17th, 2022, Jimmy. And if it's Wednesday night,
It's Black Men Speak. Let's give a big shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music and also to uh, f- um, our own studio and 4S Films for providing a virtual studio. And Tom, go ahead and break it. Well, also, let me say one more thing. We got to do this to record keeping. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, our Facebook channel, or Twitter. Like us on all three or four platforms, and Twitch if you're watching us on Twitch. And with that being said, please spread the word because we're trying to grow the channel. Subscribe, hit that like button, and Tom. With all that being said, let's get into the show.
all right, Jimmy, we have a very interesting topic for our listeners this evening and something quite sobering after you've done the research. And we're talking about modern day slavery, 21st century slavery. I mean, with us being based in the U.S., we, think of chattel slavery in, the 15th century to the 19th century, Jimmy. But, quiet as it's kept in some circles, Jimmy, by some estimates, depending on whose surveys you look like, there are upward to 40 million people who are enslaved globally around the world.
True, Tom.
And Jimmy, this is an astounding amount of capital being driven through modern day slavery. Just in profits alone, some folks estimate $150 billion in profits being driven globally by forced slavery. Jimmy, it's absolutely stunning.
Tom, I would be surprised about that 150 billion number. I would think it would be higher. I'll be totally honest.
Yeah,
And
I think
Tom,
and Jimmy, that's profits, not revenue,
right?
profits.
I would
150.
still think the profits would be higher. But Tom, black people in this country are only about 5 generations away from slavery ourselves, about
Correct.
150, 160 years. I mean, we're not talking on an evolutionary scale. 160 years is not that much time.
No,
You know what I
correct.
mean? It goes, that's a blink of an eye when you're talking about evolution. But so Tom, we can't be so comfortable in our settings that we still overlook the fact that slavery still exists. And unfortunately, Tom, or fortunate for others, maybe that we need to get back into our warrior fighting days. Black people were the champions who fought against slavery. We made this nation see that she was now living up to her words that all men are created equal. And if you can't walk the walk, then certainly don't talk the talk. And someone had to stand up to the system, Tom, risk their lives, risk their skin, risk their blood, their money, their freedom, to bring that about. And we can now sit back and think that, oh, you know what, now we can rest easy because it's over with. It's not over with. It's just transformed or mutated into a different form.
Right, Jimmy. And I mean, think about this. Depending on whose statistics you're looking at, when you think about the transatlantic slave trade, some folks estimate 10 to 15 million, other folks upward to 25 million Africans alone that were transported from the motherland to North America, South America, and the Caribbean in order to build European economies. Let's keep it very clear what the objective is. But now, today, 40 million, potentially up to 40 million folks who are in some sort of modern day slavery. And what does that look like? I mean, obviously, we see some of this stuff on the news, Jimmy, but whether you're talking about forced labor in mining camps or you're talking about agricultural works, which is a global industry, obviously the sex sex slavery industry, has been very high profile
Huge.
over the last decade, Jimmy. I, fly quite a bit. And, I know going into airport in Atlanta in particular, I mean, there were billboards all over the place and audio recordings asking for people to look for the signs that somebody is being trafficked. Human trafficking, Jimmy, right underneath our nose, multi-billion-dollar industry, Jimmy, nobody really thinks about it until it impacts them personally.
Till it's your child is missing. You're absolutely correct, Tom, and it's very sad, because a lot of those people who get trapped really can't say very much. I mean, they could escape, they could walk away from it all and seek help, but they don't, because a lot of times, Tom, if they can't afford to pay the cartels to enter the country, let's talk about the feeding the slave trade business in America through illegal immigration. If they can't afford to pay the cartels to come here, a lot of times they're attacked. They put wristbands on them, those medical wristbands, hard to get them off, and they identify who you are. The cartels know who your family members are, and if you don't pay by working for them in the slave trade, the sex trade, they will go after your family. There's nothing for them to kill your family. So if you want to keep your family safe, many times you have to stay in there, and you never actually repay them, Tom. By the time it's like the toll roads, they build it. They say we're going to collect tolls, and then we collect enough to pay the bonds off. We will deed this over to the public. It becomes a public road. Well, Tom, how long? When does it ever have any toll road that you know of? These roads never actually get paid for. They just keep adding cost to them. And it's the same way with these sex slaves. They just, lodging, food, clothes. They just keep piling costs on, and you can't make enough money to ever pay the cartels back. Your only chance is to walk away, to run away, and then endanger your family when you do it.
Yeah, Jimmy, it is sobering. It is sad. It is criminal. When you look at the amount of money that flows back and forth between slavery, and again, we are talking slavery. We're not. You have to add on to legal slavery, for instance, in the United States, because in the
Yes,
Constitution it still states that slavery is legal in the case of being incarcerated. But we're talking about also forced slavery. And the reality of it is, most folks who are enslaved within their own country. I mean, obviously, there are some folks, Jimmy, we've seen the articles where they may be forcibly moved from one country to the next. I think
yes,
in most of the research that I've done, probably the lion's share of the slavery are in Asia Pac, the Asian
yes.
rim countries, and then also there's a significant amount of slavery still
In
uh,
Africa.
Africa as well. However, when you look at the raw amount of money, and ultimately, Jimmy, it begins and ends with capitalism and profit, sadly. And looking at that, I saw one article that Jimmy said the average cost to sell a slave is 450 US dollars, and annually they make between an exploiter, someone who
Hmm.
is basically trafficking someone or forcing someone into a labor camp, makes a couple of $1,000s to a year to a couple of $100,000 a year.
Yeah, Tom. Some of the women and actually even young boys and young men actually make quite a bit of money for their slave masters. And you're right. You can go to various countries and buy slaves for a small amount of money, what we consider a small amount of money. And this tactic of moving people around dates back to the Romans. The Romans found the best way to keep large populations under control because they couldn't be spread out and have enough troops to govern the world, most of the world, known world that they conquered was to move people around. They move mass number of people around, and if you can't communicate, you can't talk to your neighbor, you can't come together to plot against us. So the language becomes an issue when you have 25, 30 groups of people all in one area and nobody can talk to each other. Other groups that can talk to each other are so small. So that's how they do the sex slave business. Also, Tom, the slaves are moved around to different countries. They don't know anyone. They don't know the layout, the landscape. They're told if you go to the authorities, we will kill you, kill your family, and a lot of times the law enforcement is on the payroll for a lot of these organizations and slave organizations, and so you're just conditioned, you're just trapped. You would nowhere to go. So this is how I felt when Africans were brought here. Our ancestors were brought to America. for the most part, they didn't know the land. They weren't like the Indians who could run away and hide, and they
Right.
had different troops that would tribes that would protect them. We didn't know the land, Tom. We had nobody, so you were absolutely trapped in your situation, and you simply have to accept it. Um, because where are you going to run to? Who's going to help you? You don't even know who to turn to, who you can trust, who you can't trust. All you know is white people brought me here. White people threw a lot of us into the ocean. We call it Middle Passage. For that 20 to 25 million to come to the Americas, North and South and Central, Tom, that number or more had to be tossed into the ocean who died along the way. So, this is so slavery in America, the Americas, was huge for the number of slaves we're talking about. But even today, Tom, we have allowed ourselves to believe that somehow the world is free, and we have made a great deal of progress. But for as much progress as we made, we still need to remember there are still a lot of people catching hell, Tom, and that slavery still exists today, be it a lesser known system of the prison system where they get free labor, um, the sex slave business, or young kids in Africa being forced into mines, into the fishing industry, which I hear is very big. People sell their kids, Tom, in Africa.
Yeah.
You know,
That is
and-
very, very sad. Uh, when you consider that, I mean, there are some folks who are kidnapped, and I mean,
Someone kidnapped.
if you look at the statistics, most of these are young children, or they're very young in age when they are kidnapped or when they're sold into slavery. And I mean, the most devastating thing is that you have children all over the world who are sold by their own family, whether it's their parents or somebody else, who are sold into slavery because they can't afford to feed them, or they feel that they can't afford to raise them.
True.
And you have folks, of course, who are exploiters as well, who go to these different countries, who will promise, the parents or the family, that they're going to take their children, they're going to get them into school, and
No, yeah, it promised all kind of great things, and
exactly,
didn't exploit them.
exactly, exactly. And
Yeah,
so, as we've talked about before, Jimmy, it's usually, those cultures of people, those communities of people who are poor, who are most vulnerable, who socially don't have the privilege and power, who are exploited the most. And who does that typically look like, Jim? So,
well, that's true. It's generally people of color. And the darker you are, probably the more exploited you are. Somehow that just seems to be the rule, which is why, Tom, I still advocate that we have to raise our young men to be warriors. There's so much that we have to stand up against, and we think that any type of resistance is futile because we're just small. But we have to realize that the people of Haiti, when the French tried to force slavery back onto them after they had fought for their freedom,
mhm.
they had to do the radical, most extreme resistance that they could think of, which is kill most of the white people on the island
Right.
to send a message. I think except for a few doctors and nurses for the tap into their medical skill, everyone else was expendable to these free slaves. And so you have to be a warrior to be able to channel your inner demon to do something like that. And we can't necessarily fight and defend ourselves. And we can say, "Oh, well, that will never happen again in America," but you don't know. You
Jimmy,
know,
it's happening right now in America. It's just not what we are looking at historically in terms of chattel slavery, but slavery is underneath our nose, and it's a multi-billion-dollar business in America
well,
too.
and Tom, so we need our young men to grow up to be warriors. They'll fight against that. You can't protect your family, your woman, your children, your neighborhood, your community, your nation being weak. I hate to sound like I'm a broken record speaking out against the betas, but we have far too many betas. The feminist movement has uh, has forced too many betas into our existence. Now's the time to break away from white movements, white thinking, and get back to doing what we know to do, which is build our young men to be strong warriors, to protect our women. So I
That's the
really,
most important thing, is
yeah.
protecting our women and our children.
Yes, John, because the women are the weakest among us, and if we're not protecting them, then they're subject to be to have these. There are young girls out there now who grew up in households with no warrior father or a warrior male figure to protect them, and they were being exploited by an uncle, by someone, some close friend of the family, never said anything, and ended up leaving home out of embarrassment and then being tired of being exploited, only to end up with someone 10 times worse. But now at that time, but by now at that age time, they're used to it. They just drug themselves up, alcohol, other distractions, drugs, to just live with their situation. They don't even care anymore. And we can't, just having one of our women or young girls fall into that trap is one too many.
Yeah, Jimmy, and you brought the point that women may be fit on average. Women physically are not going to be the stronger of men and women, but when you come to mental stamina, when you think about strategy, when you think about, I mean, God forbid, resistance to pain, women are in a lot of ways stronger than men
Yes, they are.
for the physical access. But the reality of it is, Jimmy, I think you have a point. Because when you have a community that has so few households with strong men who are protecting their families, then what happens? The women overcompensate because
Oh,
they don't have the protection and the coverage of a man. And so that rears itself in many ways that we see now, Jimmy, in terms of women being more masculine to overcompensate for the fact that they don't feel protected by the men in their household or their community.
yes, Tom. And I have, I'm just going to say some kin folks, young kin folks, that I'm just absolutely disgusted and aggravated with. And it's not just them, it's a lot of young men also. Weak, sorry, pitiful. I wouldn't even call them gammas. There's something further down the male hierarchy than gamma. But they're bought into this whole concept of pimping and big pimping, and you know um, let me go find some women to go out there and take to Houston, put them on the street. Tom, when did that become the mindset? How did we let this whole hip hop younger generation hijack the black culture, where this becomes part of the mainstream thinking for young black men to go out there and be a pimp? There's
Well,
nothing glamorous about exploiting women that way, Tom. There's
well,
nothing to pat yourself on the back. There's nothing to feel good about. All that means is, once again, you got a woman going out and having to hustle and work to take care of your sorry ass.
well, Jimmy, it has always existed.
It
And
has.
it existed, of course, when our ancestors were enslaved and were pimped and exploited. And unfortunately, when you have a mongrelized group of individuals, and I would say that, they are in the minority who feels that it is a badge of honor to be able to exploit those who they feel are physically weaker so that they can get some economic gain. But the reality of it is they are destroying and breaking up their own community, and
They
eventually
are.
it comes back to haunt them because they truly have no social power. And the reality of it is that usually there's two sets of guidelines when it comes to the law: those who exercise and control the law, and those who become victimized or byproducts of law enforcement, Jimmy. And that's usually not looking at our community when it comes to enforcing the power of the law. So we cannot afford, to your point, Jimmy, to destroy and break down our own community by trying to emulate those who've exploited our culture, our ancestors, throughout this experiment called the United States of America.
Yeah, Tom. And we have far too many young men bought into this whole pimping concept. Um, it's unfortunate that they're not on our university campuses getting an education. And let me say this for our listeners and watchers. Now's not the time to sit on the sideline and just listen to Tommy and I talk. The chat line is open. The phone line is open. Come on, guys, men and women. Come join us. Um, I see the winner put a comment in about Houston and toll road. It's not just Houston; it's Dallas also. Prices going up around here for toll roads. They never get paid off. Um, when I was in New Orleans, the bridge, they built a second bridge, put a toll on both of them. The first one was already paid for, and it's a toll road now. It never will be free again. So yeah, that whole toll scam is happening everywhere. But with that being said, the winner come call in. We want to hear your comments. Anyone else out there? The phone line is open, the chat line is open. So please let's hear from you. See what you have to
Yeah,
say.
yeah, of course, we want to thank the winner. That's Frederick V. Roberts, Esquire.
Esquire,
Who
okay.
exactly, who is a very, very strong supporter of Black Men Speak. We want to thank you. And for those
Frederick,
who are
Frederick may be our strongest supporter, Tom.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So
We
we'll have
may have to get Fred a chicken dinner, a 2-piece and a pepper from Williams Chicken.
gotcha, gotcha. So, at any rate, for those who are listening right now, feel free to call in, express your thoughts. Any of you who may have any insight on our topic for tonight, be more than happy to uh, entertain you. As we kind of go through this, Jimmy. But getting back to the point and the topic, modern day slavery,
Hmm.
not just in America but globally. It's one of those things, unfortunately, that Jimmy, that people want to look the other way. I mean, if it doesn't affect them directly, Jimmy, they don't think it affects them, but it does.
Right. That is true, Tom. And so we can't go to sleep and with a false sense of security. We'd have to be just as aware of our surroundings, Tom, as our African ancestors were 500 or 600, 500, 400 some years ago, when they were being snatched out of their homeland. So
Mhm.
you have to be aware of what's going on, where you're surrounded, and Tom, you have to be able to understand what your enemy is capable of. Don't ever think that that people are now a lot more aware, more woke, more all these left leaning terms they throw out, socialized, civilized. The reality is, Tom, is that we all have potential monsters within us. A lot of us, most keep theirs suppressed. I don't, but most keep theirs suppressed. Um, but that monster exists within all of us. This is what we describe as man's inhumanity towards man. Those things can only happen when that monster within you or a large number of people comes out. So don't ever think that you live in some utopia where these things will never happen again. You're just you're one person away from having another Hitler come up through your ranks. I don't think the Germans ever imagined that they would do the things that they did until Hitler came along and got a number of people to buy into his beliefs and put them on the wrong track. So it can happen, and so we need to be cautiously aware and guarded, Tom, that at some point America's going to run out of resources just like everyone else. The food scarcity, water scarcity, some other places are starting to be impacted by, will eventually come to America. And then guess what's going to happen? Then we have to decide who's worthy to get a canned good and buy one off the shelf. Who are we going to let starve? Who are we going to kick out of the country? Who are we going to send you any place you want to get rid of folks here, or just throw you in prison and let you rot? But so don't ever think that somehow we've made so much progress that these things can't happen. When you're hungry, starved for resources, and fighting for your survival, you'll be surprised how much of that monster is going to come alive to protect you.
Yeah, no, that's you are right on spot there, Jimmy. Um, why don't we talk about this? I mean, because at the end of the day, when we talk about modern day slavery, if we
Hmm.
talk about slavery, period, at its core, it is an economic institution.
It is.
It is used to drive profit. It is used at the core of capitalism. It's, I believe, illegal in practically every country, Jimmy. But when you look at someone paying lip service to attempting to eradicate slavery as opposed to putting your money where your mouth is, that's where the gap is, Jimmy. And unfortunately, a lot of folks who are very wealthy, a lot of institutions who have a lot of control benefit from the institution of slavery, just like there are a lot of other institutions, illicit institutions, that continue to enrich and profit those who are in power. And so that's the crux of the matter that we have to have a discussion about to understand what does it take to, at a molecular level, protect our culture, protect our families, um, drive to eliminate this scourge on humanity.
Well, Tom, that's a very good question. I'm glad you asked the question. At the tiniest level, Tom, black people in America, not black people in Africa,
Mhm.
because if you trace back the lineage to those people who trace their roots back to Moses and the slaves who escaped out of Egypt under the Pharaoh, those people were looked upon as invaders in Africa, which is why they were so easily rounded up and sold off to the Europeans. The Europeans, despite what you see on Roots, white men were not going into the heart of Africa kidnapping black people. They stayed there on the shore with guns and rum and sugar and other stuff, spices to trade for slaves. Black people went into the heart of Africa, and the people that they captured out of Africa were the ones who did not look like them, Tom.
Right.
Um, most Africans do not grow beards. A lot, the black men in America, we grow facial hair, but a lot of
Mm.
Africans, you look at the men who trace their roots, who do not have a lot of genetic mixing, don't grow beards, Tom. So it's easy to spot the outsiders. So we are closer to the vine and being God's people. And I've been saying this since I came into this knowledge back in my college days for researching this. So I make no apologies for saying what I'm saying. So Tom, we're closer to divinity than anybody on this planet. So we are soulful people. Everything about the universe is about vibrations. String theory is about vibration. People try to explain the universe. Light and energy, electromagnetism is all about a wave, which is a vibration. And there's nobody on this planet, Tom, that the sun, which provides all of our energy for life, vibrate within us better than anyone else. And so we know the right things to do, Tom. We know when things are not right. God put us kind of the guardians of righteousness. Not that other people can't be right, but we have more of the spirit, time, and the soul than anyone else. In our food, in our walk, in our activities, we have to now been pacified, drugged, and put to sleep by this great Satan, Tom, who don't want us out there to continue to fight the fight, because America was not the place where everybody was trying to immigrate to when the Klan was out there hanging people. At least not the people of color. You had Eastern Europeans who migrated to America during the Great Migration Wave, but you don't hear anyone from Mexico, Central and South America, Africa, other parts of the world coming here in large numbers the way they do now when this country was a lot less free than what it is. And so we have to continue to do our rightful part, Tom, and speak out against injustice. Because if we don't do it, I mean, who else is God going to vibrate and put that message in our hearts to speak out? We see when you leave it to others, it doesn't happen. And so we have to go back to our rightful place, Tom, of speaking out, not just against injustice against us, but injustice any place that we see it. Because, like Dr. King said, injustice anywhere
Is a threat to
is.
justice everywhere.
Thank you. And so that's what we have to get back to, Tom. We cannot, continue to just go through life thinking that okay, we're free now, we've made it, we can go out there and twerk, shake our ass, we can put on this, and the guys are out there trying to pimp women and think that somehow is what God expected us to do. It's not.
Yep, you're right, Jimmy. And the reality of it is, I mean, we can speak out, protest all we want to, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't come down to bending the political will, what are you really talking about and what are you really doing? So that's the conversation we have to have.
That's correct, Tom. That's why we need strong men to speak out. We need strong women to help encourage those strong men to always do the right thing, even if you just start on a small scale. I think I'm done. Wanted to know what the topic was. The topic is where we're talking about modern day slavery, and so with that, Tom, the first line of defense is we need strong black men to protect their families. Make sure your children, that'll be a first step. Make sure your children don't fall prey to this nonsense. Make sure your daughters aren't walking the streets pimping and prostituting themselves for some sorry piece of crap guy who calls himself a pimp. I mean, I don't right up there with child molesters, murderers, and pimps. That little group has to be the worst group that life or society can produce. And I'm okay with giving all three of them the death penalty. I mean, those are just people we just don't need in our society. They bring nothing to the table whatsoever. They're some of the biggest parasites And so any guy out there who's sitting at home, let his woman go to work when you're able bodied, you're just as bad as a guy that's out there putting little girls on the street trying to sell them.
Well, I mean, Jimmy, it comes down to consequences and repercussions and the criminalization of this activity, not just on the books, Jimmy, but, when we talk about the enforcement against the criminals themselves, I think is what's lacking, Jimmy. I mean,
Yes,
I think that too many of our handkerchief heads who are in political office, again, I understand we can find billions of dollars to spend overseas. You can find billions of dollars to extract mineral wealth from other countries, Jimmy. But when it comes to the protection of human capital, let's be very clear, folks. This affects everyone of every ethnicity,
it
both
does.
male and female. I mean, obviously, folks who are most vulnerable, folks who are probably poor, have the greatest victimization when it comes to modern day slavery. But it also affects folks who are middle class and wealthy because folks are literally snatched off of the streets. Folks who are lured into traps, thinking that they're going to get a great job someplace or, thinking they're going to literally go to a party, Jimmy. And then they are snatched, they're trafficked. And this isn't just something that affects folks who are poor, but
That's correct.
disproportionately it does, Jimmy. So it affects everybody, every color, both male and female. And so at the end of the day, Jimmy, the question is, how do you raise the flag to bend the political will who wants to look the other way in order to deal with this? Because, Jimmy, that which affects the least of those eventually comes to visit those who have privilege.
Well, Tom, I think you hit on it early on when you talked about the institutions in in not just in this country but around the world in the West and even in the East. Tom, who benefit from all of this? They have more political say. For example, you know, um, we know that the schools in the inner city, generally in black areas, need to be improved. And Tom, I don't care how much who you vote for, how much support you lend behind a candidate. Um, no one's going to fix those schools because it benefits too many folks to have blacks come out of the system uneducated. If you
And,
can't think for yourself,
let's unpack what that looks like when you talk about poor schools benefiting the wealthy.
well, I just
What
want to use that as an example because it's a group dynamic, Tom. If my children are headed to Harvard or headed to a good university, going to come out, have to get find a nice job to protect their quality of life that they've been accustomed to, that I've been able to provide for them, and your child is coming out to try to apply and try to get that same job, it's to my advantage to wreck your system, wreck your schools, wreck your economy, cut off mass transit to your areas, and hold you back as best I can. It's not that I don't like you, Tom. It's just that if I'm white, if I'm yellow, if I'm red, if I'm whatever color, and and I'm trying to protect and look out for me and mine. Okay, yeah, when you and yours get in my way, you force me to do what I have to do to protect mine. It's group survival, Tom, and we don't understand group survival because we're so busy with, focusing on racism. Everybody who opposes you, to quote Tony Brown, everyone who opposes you don't necessarily oppose you out of racism. Sometimes they just oppose you out of group survival. If a white person is sitting behind that desk and you have two candidates, one white, one black, I got to get a job to somewhere. All things look equal on the resumes. Who am I going to give the job to? Most likely, I'm going to give the job to the person I feel more comfortable being around. And that's not necessarily racism. That's just I identify with this white person who's trying to put his kids or her kids through school. I don't know about you, but I know you probably have some anger management issues, some drug issues. Criminals, and that's what your culture and your people are about. I've seen BET. I've seen y'all out there on the corner, slinging dope, and so this is become the determining factor. Sometimes, Tom, group survival, and so we have to understand that and start realizing, as a group, we have to fight for our group. We have to empower our group, and that starts with raising warriors and stopping relying on these beta men out here to be on the front line for our culture.
Where we do converge on this, Jimmy, because I mean, you can't say, I mean, racism has always existed. It's probably always going to exist. But where we do converge is that group economics is absolutely critical when you talk about protecting your family, protecting your community, protecting your entire culture. The reality of it is the European countries were fighting each other until they realized, why the hell are we fighting each other when we have all this wealth over here in Africa? Let's put our differences aside. Let's split up this country, and then everybody gets wealthy. And so they use divide and conquer as a strategy. And so when you reverse engineer that, Jimmy, if you as a culture or as a group of people have been programmed to believe that you, in the interest of protecting other folks who have power over you, that it's somehow in your benefit to continue to break down and to target your own people, Jimmy, you have to reprogram that. If you're going to survive in the next millennia, you're going to have to put your differences aside. You're going to have to find unity and solidarity to protect yours first, your culture first, your family first. And to your point, Jimmy, that ain't called racism, that's called survival.
Well, Tom, you're absolutely correct. When you go back and you look at the history of Western European, and you're right. When they were competing for resources among each other, then it was who could outconquer who to take their land, to take their women, to take their wealth. But then you're right. Once they discovered that there was a whole continent of land, people, resources, what? We can just go down there and take it? Oh, come on, let's all get together, let's go. The Portuguese, the Spaniards, hell, even the Scots, who were not known for shipbuilding, became massive shipbuilders at that time when everyone decided and discovered Africa and the resources there and what they can go explore. Tom, the Africans had so much gold that gold didn't mean that much to them.
Yeah.
But the Europeans who did not understood the scarcity of gold. They understood the scarcity of land. So let's get down there and let's carve it all up. Let's colonize as much of it as we can because the resources here, the growing season here, is not conducive to feed this many people. We're never going to grow population when you have food scarcity. The whole Irish famine was about them not being able to grow enough food to feed their population. Hell, if someone didn't bring the potato to the Europeans, which the potatoes and the sweet potato came from where? Came from Africa.
Yeah.
So if you didn't find that and bring it to the Europeans, hell, you may have had a whole country, which you did have a whole country starving to death, but then they may not have been rescued if it wasn't for that.
You're right, Jimmy. And so, as we get into I guess the last third of our show, let's kind of talk brass tacks in
Hmm.
terms of, we have two brothers on here talking about a global institution and a global economy based upon the exploitation of labor, primarily victimizing and subjecting women, primarily victimizing and subjecting children to exploitation, to harsh labor conditions. And where do we go from here?
Well, Tom, I want to add to that list also to a very lesser degree men who are trapped in relationships, trapped in families where they don't lead. Where they've relegated and delegated that to their significant other, be it a wife, the person you live with, your mama, children, it doesn't matter. That's a low level form of slavery that's self induced also, because you can't be happy in that situation. So women don't like beta men. Beta men really don't like, deep down, don't like their situations. Um, but they settle for each other to get through life. And settling in life is a form of slavery also. But Tom, it really just comes down to this: what we've been talking about consistently. We will continue to talk about this. Black men have to step up and protect theirs at every level: economics, your neighborhoods, your communities, your children. But it starts with your children. Fathers out there, do not let your daughters get trapped in the system where they are out there selling their bodies. Their bodies are precious. The gifts that a woman has is to be heaven to a man here on earth. No man really wants a woman who's shared her heaven with just about every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there for money. I mean, it just doesn't work out that way for most. So we have to be guarded, Tom, and it starts with raising these young men to be strong men. Um, for our betas to make up their mind and stop being betas and stand up and be fathers, to stand up and be husbands, stand up to be leaders in the household, and just say, if your daughter's out there like that, don't turn a blind eye and pretend you don't know. Like these families who somehow, your son hadn't graduated high school, but he's bringing in $2,000 or $3,000 a week slinging dope, and you pretend like I don't know what he's doing. Of course, you know what he's doing. So we have to stop pretending and look the other way and stand up and say, "Hey, these things are wrong." Not only is it wrong for our children, it's wrong for illegals who get caught up that way also. I know they're just and imagine, Tom, how hellish your life has to be to voluntarily go into a life of slavery to get away from your current existence. So I'm not a Kamala Harris to say we need to go build the Central and South America. What I am saying is I understand that people are catching hell all over the globe, Tom. People selling their children into slavery, because they think that is going to be better for them than what I can provide. And really, sometimes they just don't know how hellish it is, or sometimes they do know and they look the other way and pretend like they don't know, like they want to believe that this person is telling them the truth, even though deep down they've heard the stories and the rumors and know that when you hand your child over, what the hell that person's getting ready to catch at that point.
Well, Jimmy, I'll add to what you've shared there, and I thought you made some very salient points. I think the first responsibility of black men is to protect black women. When they protect their black women, their black children by de facto will be protected as well. At a nuclear level, we have to be in the business of raising strong families, raising and building strong communities, and protecting those communities. We have to be our brother's keeper, and we
Yes, we
also
do.
have to be very good neighbors. And the reality of it is, Jimmy, if you have a common enemy, then obviously you have something in common. So, one, we have to unify. We have to find solidarity in the fact of the things that we are dealing with, and in particular, if we're
Yes.
talking about modern slavery, the majority of those are folks who look like you and me, Jimmy, black folks, brown folks, whatever you want to look at it. And Jimmy, we have to find those few things that make a difference in our community. Now, most folks look the other way. They have no idea that this industry even exists. But it's uh, if the conservatives say that $150 billion in profit every year, annually, globally,
Every year.
I would have to think if it's $150 billion in profit, that's probably a easy $1 trillion industry, Jimmy.
Tom, $1 trillion, like the black nation here in America, it's about 1.6 to 1.8, depending on what the projection is going to lend out for this year. We'll know more at the end of the year. But Tom, $1 trillion easily lands you in the top 10 of GDPs for the world. There are some
Right,
countries that don't earn. In fact, most countries don't earn $1 trillion. There are only about 9 or 10 of them that are over the $1 trillion mark, and black people in America have 1.6 of it.
right.
So we could do a great deal to free ourselves. We have to understand the economic power. And when we talk about coming together, Tom, group survival, we're not anti-white, we're not anti-anybody. We're just being pro-black and looking out for ourselves. But I'm amazed, Tom, when you start talking about coming together and doing for yourself, how a lot of people, their body language, you get all curled up and tight, and they start whispering like, you shouldn't be talking with things like saying things like
Well,
this,
well,
especially if white people are around.
well,
Tom,
Jimmy, you're right, but that's because they have no control of their own destiny, and they are dependent on other folks to control their destiny. So as a result, yeah, they're going to get a little bit choked up. At the end of the day, Jimmy, I mean, if you think about this, if in fact, probably conservatively, there are 40 million folks who are somehow enslaved
in some
globally.
form of slavery, yes, around the
Think about
world.
this, Jimmy. There are 40 million black people in America. That
Yes.
means that everyone who is black in America is slaved on a global level. That is catastrophic, Jimmy. And so ultimately, we understand what we can do at a nuclear level or at a micro level in terms of our families and our communities, Jimmy. but we have to be unapologetic,
Unapologetic.
leaning on this multi-trillion-dollar economy and doing what we can do here at home.
Well, Tom, even for the folks out there who think they're free, and I'm glad you pointed that out, um, we're all slaves to the system to some degree. Whether it's taxes or you're trapped in a job that you don't like, trapped in a family situation, a relationship you don't like, your life is just not what you want it to be. But Tom, you hit on something that we've talked about many times on this show, that you have to have a plan for your life. You can't just sit back and let others dictate and determine your life and then say you're free. It's not about money. It's not about wealth. Those are the trappings of people who have a plan, who are willing to go out and fight for it. Unfortunately, many of our men don't know how to even make a basic plan for their life. They just think they're just supposed to do this, go to work, pay bills, just live, and they're miserable. God does not intend you to be miserable. There's nowhere written that you're supposed to just go through life being miserable. What the Bible says is that Adam and Eve, God set them free of the garden with the hope, with the desire, and the knowledge to go out and till the land and make it yours. You can't live in my garden, but you can go out and make your own. There's nothing stopping you from making your own. Now that you've come into this knowledge that I told you that you shouldn't have, but now that you've come into it, yeah, go do it for yourself now. And so that is where we are, Tom. We have to realize that we are, to some degree, gods with a small g, and we can make our own heaven here and make our own reality. But it starts with a plan, Tom. And if you don't know what your plan in life is, then maybe you need to come talk to the Black Men Speak so we can explain it to you.
Gotcha. And so, to summarize it, Black men have to step up, build families, build communities.
You can't be the father of nations, Tom, which the Bible, God calls you to be, if you don't have a family. I don't know how that's going to work out.
Right.
Where's your nation going to start? Or if your kids are just out there and you're not providing direction for them, setting goals for them, and being a good shepherd to make sure that your children and your sons and your daughters have a plan in life. They don't end up on one of these street corners somewhere being prostituted and pimped out. If you're not doing that, Tom, you're not being a good shepherd for your family.
Right.
And you will not be blessed in life. So it's time for us, Tom, to, whether you believe in the Bible or not, you're a Christian or not, it doesn't matter. The reality is all these self-help books, from the 7 Habits to all the rest of them, they all say the same thing, Tom. Start with a plan. Make a goal for yourself. Divide it up in the steps that you have to do to reach that goal. And guess what? Just go out and do it like Nike said. If you're not doing that, Tom, at every stage of your life, you can't just reach one plateau and stop. This is a continuing process. So wherever you are in life, start looking to define what the next level, next goal, the next challenge, the next adventure is going to be. Always be doing something, setting goals. Let your children, your nation, see you doing these things so they can emulate that. And people with direction and hopes and goals, Tom, that are out there working for it and fighting for it, these are not people that got waste their time with drugs and alcohol. They're not getting caught up in the system, being fingerprinted, left, right, front. They're not ending up in somebody's prison. They're too busy fighting to make themselves happy and to reach their goals in life. And we need all Black men, all you betas out there and gammas, to understand the process also and get with the program.
From my perspective, Jimmy, it all starts in your house, on your block, on your street, in your community. For what it's worth, we understand that, institutions, corporations, both folks of wealth and resource benefit from this institution that we call slavery. It always has been, Jimmy,
always.
In the building of this economy, this experiment that we call United States, built on the back of slavery. However, if we're talking about taking and making an impact in an area, in a domain that we can control, Jimmy, it starts in your home, it starts on your street, it starts in your community. Eradicate anything with the semblance of criminal activity, enslavement. I mean, Jimmy, this stuff is right underneath our nose. It goes on in our schools. Whether you talk about things that are driven by drug activity, when you talk about forced labor, Jimmy, it's right underneath our eyes. we have to open our eyes and look and not be afraid, because the reality of it is, Jimmy, it could be any of us or it could be a member of our family. And
True.
we can't wait until then in order to go out and do something about
That is true, Tom. Once your children are caught up, I'm not saying it's impossible to get them out, but it's very difficult. You have to find them first. You have to undo the programming and all of the negative effects that drove them to this life. Just pulling them back home is not the answer. If they're going to put them back in the same condition that drove them to the streets to start with. So Tom, we have to understand we have to protect our own, and standing up for your group. There's nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be embarrassed. It doesn't make you a racist, doesn't make you prejudiced, doesn't make you anything other than a warrior and a protector of your own.
it. Gotcha. All right. I think we want to actually thank Monsignor Noel on his currently in the Black community, a family as a single mother and children. We're
Yes.
slave to independence and individualism.
Yeah, because you can't build a nation starting with your family, your
Mhm.
children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, which all becomes part of your nation, Tom. You can't do that when you've broken the families up. So the destruction of the black family during the '60s was a necessity for that group survival that we talked about. It's not that the white liberal was anti-black. That's not the case at all. They're just anti-black family. They're anti-black success. They're anti-strong black men because they understand that this is about group survival. If I can keep your group in disarray and filled with problems and stress, scare the police, scare everything else, or fill your strong black men in prisons where they are not in a family structure, then Tom, there's no way we can ever, never, ever catch up with other groups that are more successful than us. I mean, you notice that the East Indian population, I'm not talking about American Indians, Native Indians, East Indian population from India and Pakistan, um, they're 1.5% of the population, Tom, and they've almost matched us on the wealth scale. How is that possible? Because they have strong families. Tell them they value education. They do everything that we don't do. I don't see Indian women on TV or on YouTube out there twerking, clapping their butts and stuff. You just don't see stuff like that, Tom. Or you don't look to the other groups, whether it be East Indians or Asians, looking at celebrities to set the direction. If you want to know something about the universe, you turn to a physicist, mathematician. You turn to somebody who's in the know, a subject matter expert. You don't turn to P. Diddy or Puffy or to Will Smith or any other celebrity to tell you what's up and what's down. Be part of the B Nation, getting information from Beyonce. Not that he's a bad people, but when I want to know something about a subject, I go to the person that I think has the most knowledge about that subject and talk to them.
Very, very interesting points, Jimmy. I don't know too many other communities where their entertainers are the chief spokesperson for their communities.
Well, not be successful. The groups
Yeah.
that are successful here in America and even around the world, if you like read any of Thomas Sowell's books, he pointed out how the Chinese and how the Africans and other groups who repopulated, moved around the world, how successful they are. Tom, the Nigerians are the most successful doctors in England. Nobody wants to go to a white doctor in England. They want to go to a Nigerian doctor. Why? Because Nigerian doctors are the smartest, and they've been
Mhm.
recognized for that. So, Tom, we just have to set our direction and get it right. And getting right is not with the feminist movement where our women are leading families, and leading into destruction. There's nothing good about a mother raising children by herself. Nothing at all.
Gotcha. All right, Jimmy. Well, we are right almost at the top of the hour. So I think we're going to have to give our closing comments, and then we're going to have to wrap this show up. But we want to thank our listeners who are out there. We want to thank um, Brother Winner, Frederick V. Roberts. We want to thank
The
you,
winner.
Monsieur Noor, Brother Seth. We want to thank you out there. We want to thank you, Brother Asar, for continuing to be one of our strongest supporters as well. Jimmy, closing thoughts on this topic, global
Well, don't,
impact.
don't don't leave out the I'm done and you see you see you see I'm done.
Oh, yes, I'm done as well. Okay. Yeah, we want to thank I'm done for showing up as well. I don't think I've seen I'm done, and hopefully they will come back.
Well, come back and then next time, feel free to call and join us on the chat line. We put the phone number there because we want to hear from everyone. You guys can help set the direction for this show, things that you're interested in, you want us to talk about, you want us to uncover, even if it's a topic we've already covered. We're glad to put it back on the schedule and talk about it again. So, Tom, with the last couple of minutes left, I'm going to go ahead and say my little 2 cents and then let you close out the show.
Okay.
My challenge, once again, to all black men out there, I don't care, where you are, if you're a gamma, you're a beta, or you're an alpha. Alpha men can always get better at what they do, become better men. That's our challenge to each other, and so it's needed. We've seen um, we've seen currently, and we know what our future is going to be if strong black men don't come back into the household, don't come back to their families and take charge of their households, take charge and responsibility for their children. And that's not just financially. Tom, I often say that your dad is one of my heroes, um, but I would not think highly upon your dad if you hadn't turned out the way you are. Yeah, I'm sure your dad would not allow you to get caught up in the wrong crowds with the wrong people, to get off track educationally. You would not achieve the things that you have in life if your dad or your mother had allowed that to happen. And that's
Mm.
where we have to get back to, Tom. It's not just some financial support, feeding them, put a roof over their head. It's also making sure that your sons grow up to be strong warriors, that your daughters grow up to be good helpmates and companions to those warriors, and set the stage for the warriors to go out there and fight for them, fight for their family, fight for their children, and then take personal responsibility to make sure that family is intact and those kids on set in the right direction and they have everything they need to be successful. And if you're not doing that, as far as I'm concerned, you're no better than those who exploit, children and women and girls for their own profit.
Jimmy, I'll keep mine brief, simple, and to the point. As a black man, our highest order is to protect the black woman.
Yes.
And as a result, we'll be protecting the children within our community. Jimmy, building strong families, building strong communities. And obviously, there is no me without we. I am a part
Right.
of the collective, Jimmy. And so as a result, we have to be in the business of building strong communities, building strong economies. And that way, as a culture of people, we're not dependent on anyone else, Jimmy.
True.
Until we get to that point, we have to continue to fight the good fight. As men, we have to be fearless in terms of dying for a greater cause than who we are individually in order to protect what we believe in. And I think that, Jimmy, surpasses and trumps, no pun intended, the continual thirst for the dollar,
Mm-hmm.
but you're selling out your community. And we unfortunately have had too many people who have sold out our communities for $1. We cannot support them, Jimmy. And so as a result, if it comes down to someone who looks like you and I, Jimmy, and we think that they're exploiting someone,
You
a
gotta
woman,
call them out.
are involved, Jimmy, we have to call it out. We have to be able to go to
Yes.
this. We have to be willing to put up our lives in order to protect our community. And that's what it's going to take. That's all I've got to say.
And Tom, you have folks out there dying for colors, dying for streets that you don't own property on the street, dying for a neighborhood of colors, but yet you won't die to protect your family and your children. That's a sad testament, Tom. So, but you're absolutely right, and we are at the top of the hour. We have less than a minute left, so Tom, we're going to go ahead and close it out. Everybody, please come back next week. We'll have another interesting show for you. And next time, please, more than just we appreciate the chats, but feel free to call in. Um, you don't have to tell us who you are if you don't want to, but yeah, give us a call and we'd like to talk to you. With that being said, Tom, we are out.
Good night.
Good night.